Welcome to the Success Sculpting Show with Stephen Pierce, bringing you the right information right now to sculpt a more meaningful and memorable life of success. Join us each week to discover gems to help you grow your mental toughness, expand your will to win, and multiply your results. It's never been easier to learn what to do and how to do it to succeed at what you choose to do.
This is truly an experience you won't find anywhere else.
Now, here's your host, the Success Sculptor himself, Stephen Pierce.
Hey, this is Stephen Pierce, and I want to welcome you to episode number 6 of the Success Sculpting Show with yours truly, Stephen Pierce. And what we're going to be talking about today is how to change your life. Listen, when things seem to be changing for the worse, I'm going to give you some very specific things you can do to take control so you can change them for the better. Now, listen, people often say, I want to change my life. I want to change my life. Now, see, here's the good news. Your life is changing, even without your consent. See, here's the thing. Change is not only constant, it doesn't require your consent. Let me explain what I mean. First, change can happen fast, and we can take notice of it because it happens so fast, or it can happen at a crawl, at a snail's pace, at a real slow pace, and we don't really notice it until that change is upon us. For example, like the sun rising and the sun setting. It's a constant movement. However, for the most part, we don't notice all the small things in between what's noticeable between darkness and it being noticeably bright outside. Now, whether change happens fast or it happens slow, that's actually secondary to one of the most critical aspects of change. The most critical aspect of change that trumps speed is direction. You see, whether fast or slow in terms of change, if you're changing in the wrong direction, it's bad by all definitions and in every language. All right, so there's 3 things that we want to understand about change, okay? 1, change is constant, and we know that. And it can happen fast, it can happen slow. And I really believe that's all relative because if somebody says, oh, that's fast or that's slow, they have to be comparing that to something. But, that's a topic for a different conversation. But bottom line is change is constant. We know that and we get that. Also, change is directional, meaning change happens in very specific directions. Now, the third thing is without your deliberate input into the direction of the change, the default direction could be a disaster. All right. See, the difference is like the difference between driving and steering a boat or just drifting about with the winds and the waves in the environment. And for many people, if you don't take control of your life to deliberately direct the change that's going to happen anyway, but you just decide to direct it in a way that it serves you as opposed to sabotages you, if we don't do that, then the default is we are basically forced into a direction based on the elements of the environment. And that's not necessarily going to work out in our favor. Okay. Also, I don't really think we change in terms of us individually. I don't really think we control change as much as we respond to it or react to it. It's kind of like a drop of water. Just like a drop of water doesn't change the tides of the ocean. We don't control market changes or people changes or weather changes. Now, some can argue against that, and that's fine too. We can talk about how we impact the environment as a whole. Well, that's true. However, as a whole, as collective people, we impact stock markets. Markets go up and markets go down. But as an individual, you don't control the masses. So we're talking about on a level that you're able to control. See, if you start to go out the peripheral into territory that you have no control over, then you start to put energy and focus in places that you really aren't able to use it. Okay? So we want to make sure that as we're thinking about control, we're thinking about what it is we are able to influence, what we're able to impact. All right, so here's the thing. If we don't control change per se in the sense of making certain things happen in the environment, but if for the most part, change is always upon us, change is constant, change is consistent, and change is directional, but we don't really control it, we can direct it as opposed to controlling it. You don't control sun up, sun down. Right? You don't control the 24 hours in the day, but what you can control is what you deposit into those 24 hours of the day. You can control what you're doing at sunrise and at sunset, right? So you can direct those moments of change in your own way. So here's the thing. If we don't control it, but we respond and react to it, what are our real options? Because a lot of times people talk about, oh, change this, change that. And we talk about change in this global generic sense, but we don't really get down to the specifics on, well, if you want to change your life, well, how do we actually change our lives? Well, here's what I want to do. I'm going to give you some specific things here. We're not going to talk about general stuff in terms of change. We're going to get into some specifics, but before we do that, I want to play something for you. I know, it's another clip. Well, I'm going to play a clip. It was a seminar I was doing. And in this seminar, I was talking about change, and I was sharing this story that has to do with carrots, eggs, and coffee. I know that kind of sounds like, well, that's the breakfast story. Were you talking about breakfast? Well, no, I wasn't talking about breakfast, but it was kind of early in the morning. But I want to share this story with you because I think you're going to understand the answer to the question of what are our options in responding or reacting to change. So let me play this for you real quick, and then we're going to come back and we're going to dive deep into some stuff here, get into some specifics about how do we ultimately change our lives for the better when it seems like things are changing for the worse. So let's go to this clip and I'll be right back with you.
We all have to deal with change. Every single one of us, and it's how we deal with the changes that's going to determine how successful we become. Give you an example. Everybody cross your arms. Cross your arms. Look at which wrist is on top. Look at it, look at it. Okay, uncross your arms. Now cross them the opposite way. Now I see some of you struggling. That's okay. Now let me ask you this. Was it as comfortable the second way as it was the first way? Yes or no? No. But was it possible? Yes. My point. See, change is not all the time comfortable, but it's pretty much all the time possible. So it's really a decision. Are we looking to be comfortable? So therefore we resist the change process. Or are we looking to be successful and we embrace the change process? So it's not really about avoiding change. It's about developing the kind of muscle that will allow us to push through the change process and embrace it and allow ourselves to become more enlightened and stronger and more successful as a result of change. Brings up a story. There was a little girl and she was young. She's like 16 years old. And she was dealing with all these things in her life and she didn't really know how to deal with change. So she went to her dad. Her dad was a cook. And she went to her dad and said, Dad, I have all these things in my life that are changing. I just don't know how to deal with it. And he really didn't know how to respond. So he took her into the kitchen. He pulled out 3 pots. And one, he put some carrots. In another one, he put some eggs. And then in another pot, he put some coffee. He let them boil. Then he took them off. And then he put each one into a bowl. And he looked at his daughter and said, what do you see? She's like, I don't understand. He said, what do you see has happened here? She said, oh, wait a second. The carrots used to be hard and now they're soft. And the eggs, they're the opposite. They used to be soft on the inside, but now they're hard on the inside. And the coffee beans didn't change. It turned the water into coffee. So the question is this. Are you going to become hardened by change and just really angry and pissed off and resistant to the change process? Are you going to become soft as a result of change and become weakened and be woe is me, all these things are changing? Or are you going to use change as raw material and create the kind of life and environment that it is you both deserve and desire? See, what we do with change is a choice.
All right, so the point here from the story is we decide how we're going to respond to the different changes. Do we become hardened and almost go to this state of paralysis where you feel as if there's nothing you can do, or you become soft and weakened by it and become fragile and you go curl up in a corner somewhere in the fetal position? It's just like, Lord, make it go away. Or do we use that change as raw material to create whatever it is we want? Listen, instead of reacting to change in a panic, we want to respond to change with a very specific purpose. And it's a good idea to have that purpose in mind before change comes upon you. And the reason why is because when change is starting to be thrown at you, fast or slow, you can keep evaluating, how does this serve the purpose? How can this serve the purpose? How can you use this to serve the purpose? So you can extract from it something that really becomes wind, for lack of a better phrase, wind beneath your wings to help you to rise higher to that purpose, as opposed to a weight that is weighing you down, so you may feel, and keeping you from that purpose. And going back to the point that we don't really control change, let me emphasize something that I think we're probably make the point perfectly clear that there's certain changes, and for the most part, a lot of changes that just happen, and we either respond or react to them. Think about the millions of people who lost their jobs. And, maybe you're one of them, or one of them. Was that change? Yes, of course. Did they ask for that change? No, of course not. So let's keep this one thing in mind. And you may want to write this down. Change will happen to you or because of you, but it's going to happen, right? Change is going to happen to you or because of you. In other words, you're either going to be at the effect of change, and I think to a certain extent we all are. It's kind of like somebody pitching a ball at you. You got a choice. You can get hit by the ball or you can swing and knock it out of the park, right? So either you're going to be the effect of change or you're going to be the cause of change. Passively living our lives mean we just sit about and we just wait for change to happen to us. And then we react to it, sometimes overreact to it, or what have you. Then life just spins out of control and there's a whole bunch of chaos, and kind of like go through that cycle over and over again. However, if we know that change is constant and we know that change doesn't require our consent, but we can be proactively involved in the process, we can start to look at life through this lens that things are constantly changing. What's changing? How does this impact me? How does this impact today? How does this impact tomorrow? And all this other kind of stuff. All right. Now, there's two different dimensions of change, though. Two different dimensions. You want to write this down, which, by the way, the show notes can be found over on the show blog at successsculptingshow.com. You can go over to successsculptingshow.com, click on today's episode 6 title, and I'll take you to the page where you can get the show notes. All right. Now, there's two different dimensions of change. One are the external changes in politics and the environment, the economy, and relationships. Now, do those changes impact you and influence your life? Of course they do, but you don't control them. If something changes, if something happens in the political system, like they raise taxes, right? That's going to have an impact on the economy, as the global economy, in terms of, well, I should say the national economy, but it's going to also have an impact on your personal economy, depending on what tax bracket you're in, and so on, right? Relationship changes, getting together with somebody new, breaking up with someone old. Does that impact you? Of course it does. Hey, even relationships that you are not maybe personally involved in, like the passing of the guard in the White House from like the Republicans to the Democrats, or the Democrats to the Republican, one president to another president. Is that change? Sure. Does that impact other things? Absolutely. So those are external changes. But one of the things that external changes tend to have in common is that while they can impact you, you don't really control them so much. All right. So that's why it's amazing. I understand we want to lift our voices about certain things, but some people, they let their lives go out of control over stuff that they just have no control over. You can't control government decisions. Whatever they're going to do, they're going to do. So you need to understand, based on certain decisions that other people are making that will have an impact on you, how do you respond or how do you react? And we're going to get into some options as we get through this episode, okay? Now, the second dimension of change are the internal changes, like the changing of your thoughts, the changing of your focus, the changing of your moods, the changing of your feelings. Now, those things you have absolute total control over. Isn't that true? Of course. So now both of these worlds, these two different dimensions, they do meet. The external world with your internal world. The external, we don't really have an opportunity to control, but we're able to control our internal, which is really important because by controlling what's going on internally, we can decide through what lens we are going to view the external changes in the environment. And that makes the difference between figuring out a way to leverage it or being leveled by it. That's that makes the big difference between we're going to leverage this change as opposed to, whoa, they got leveled by the change. All right. So now, how do we change our lives into whom we want to be, instead of having life change us into what we don't want to be? Now, remember, if we don't proactively be involved in this change process, we're going to become something. It's just not going to be what it is ideal for us. So here's one of the rules, okay? The number one rule, and again, this is my personal opinion. It served me well. Hopefully it'll serve you. The number one rule of changing your life is to stop comparing your life to other people's lives, right? There's just no real value in doing that. I know we live in a society that seems to put that on us because it's we're smothered with comparisons. But you don't have to play that game. From a self-pity standpoint, that group compares their lives to another person's life in a way where they feel inferior to everybody and to everything, and it keeps them stuck there. Now, from the self-arrogant standpoint, that person compares their life in such a way where they feel superior to other people. They're feeling bigger and better than other people. Now, they're not going to go and compare their lives to somebody that's doing better than them because they don't want to feel inferior. So they always look and pick and choose and cherry pick who they make comparisons to. And so does the person who comes from a more self-pity point of view. All right. But here's the thing. We want to cut that crap because it doesn't serve you either way. All right. I personally believe that our comparisons should be how well I'm performing today than I did yesterday. You know, we compare our performance to our own performance as to other people. But that being said, if you insist on comparing yourself to other people, you know, to feel inferior for some reason, or you get off in feeling superior, I challenge you to do this comparison. I believe this is the best comparison of them all. Okay, so here's the comparison challenge for you. Compare how much they can take with them to the grave versus you. See, here's the thing. With that comparison, we're all on par. We're all equal because as tempting as the treasures of this life are, no one, no matter how strong their grip, can take anything with them. Now, that doesn't mean you go through like, I can't take it with me, so no need to have anything. No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that, listen, you know, at the end of the day, everybody dies and nobody takes anything, right? So, you know, we want to kind of have a balanced thought process and not put too much emphasis on things that from an eternal perspective doesn't really mean that much. Now, I'm not saying, hey, let's just all go back to the garden and be butt naked, you know, but what I'm saying is that you shouldn't go through life feeling bad if your shoes don't cost as much as the next person, or your watch, or your car, or your house, or your clothing, or your jewelry, or your makeup, or all these superficial things. While they're nice, it's not nice to have those things to batter and browbeat how you're feeling about yourself and what you believe is possible, and certainly your self-worth and the value you feel as if you provide here as a human being on this planet. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the noise of things. So one of the main, if you want to change your life, what we have to do is stop comparing in such a superficial way that we become delusional about what's really important. It doesn't matter. Listen, no matter how much money a person has in a bank account, there's always going to be somebody with more. No matter how much less you have, there's going to be somebody with less. Right? So let's rise above that. I'm not saying those things aren't important, but I don't think that we should put those above how we're feeling about ourselves and use those as a rule of measure on our personal value. You know, how much you have in your bank account, the value of your closet of clothes, how many cars you have, and all this other kind of stuff. You know, the square footage of your house, and all these different things. This doesn't make any sense, okay? So what we want to do is we want to resist that temptation, okay? We want to resist that temptation, all right? Number one rule, make sure you write that down. We need to stop comparing. Oh, and let me say this. We want to stop comparing consciously and subconsciously. Now, we know when we're doing it consciously because we're completely engaged in it, but we want to see if we can catch ourselves doing it subconsciously as well. And that can happen because it's habitual. And you want me to tell you something? Listen, a lot of this has basically come upon us because of the way we were raised in our different environments and the culture. People are always comparing, one woman to the next woman, one guy to the next guy. You got a fat stomach, he has a flat stomach. You got little breasts, she has big breasts. You got a flat butt, she got a big butt. She has nice lips, you got not so nice lips. Her hair is long, yours is short and nappy. You're bald or balding. It's just all these different things. And then along with that, they're characterized, well, if you have a flat butt, then that's not a good thing. If you have a big butt, then, praises be to the big butts and all these different things. So it's not just those comparisons, it's what those comparisons ultimately mean to us and how we feel about ourselves. So I'm telling you, this is one of the walls that we want to get through. And the reason why is because the moment you allow yourself to be freed up from those superficial comparisons, you can start to meet the true you. You can start to allow yourself to breathe this fresh air of just knowing who you are authentically and not having yourself to basically breathe this air that's filled with all these toxins of what other people think about you and having that to influence how you think about yourself. Number one rule of changing your life is to stop comparing your life to the lives of other people. Doing good or bad does not matter, okay? We don't want to make those comparisons, all right? Now, that is a part of one of the walls of prevention, how we're looking at ourselves and how many of us look at ourselves through comparisons, okay? And most of the time, those comparisons don't serve us, all right? Now, there's three things in the walls of prevention to change, and I call it the FUD factor, F-U-D, and that is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Many of us will tend to resist the change process because we fear. One of the main fears when it comes to the change process is we fear the unknown. We don't know what's next, so we kind of fear that. The other thing is, and which, by the way, I have some upcoming episodes, and we'll dive deeper into some of these, but right now we'll just touch on them, all right? The second thing is uncertainty. And that can definitely happen with technology. You're a little uncertain because it's so brand new. And listen, in all the training that I've done around the world, one of the things that I've constantly done is introduce people to things they haven't done before. And I want to share with you what I share with them. It's not difficult, it's just new. And if you take that perspective with a lot of different things, and you're probably like, well, you know, you start talking about aerodynamics and physics and all kinds of stuff like that, that can get a little complicated. Well, let me tell you something. If your view is, no, it's not complex or difficult, it's just new, how do you think you're going to approach the subject matter? How do you think your angle of attacking that material is going to be, as opposed to, oh my gosh, this is so difficult? It's difficult before you even started. You've set yourself up to have a whole lot of friction. Are you following me? So if before we even do something new, we have this perspective like this is going to be difficult. And the thing is that many times we believe because we haven't done it before, it's going to be difficult. And that's not true. You would not have made it to this point you are in your life, regardless of how much older and mature you may be or how young you are. You would not have made it this far without a constant pattern of learning new things. And even in many areas, going to the point of mastering those new things. So we're always introduced to the new. It's just that sometimes we have so much time to think about it, we classify it as difficult, right? So we want to come from underneath that little hypnosis that these different things are difficult. Let's just approach it as, this is new. So what happens is we can kind of address that uncertainty. And a lot of that uncertainty comes because of things we haven't done before, technology that we may not be familiar with, territories that we may not be familiar with, environments that we may not be familiar with. And we have all this uncertainty, and that can impede our performance, and it impedes us wanting to engage the change process and really maximizing it and using it. And the other one is doubt, right? Just doubt, and we so look down on ourselves so much that we don't even calculate how many times we've done something right. We don't calculate how many wins we have. We don't calculate all the great things that people said about us. And listen, I think this is true for all of us. You can have a great day. You can have 25 people come up to you and tell you, great job, awesome, you look awesome, you're amazing, and all this. One person can come over to you and you have to bleep his or her entire conversation. What do you think you remember for the most of the day or by the end of the day? That one negative thing. And this is where taking control comes back in, because by default, and for some reason, there's just this negative drift. That negative drift means without deliberate control of our thoughts, without deliberate control of our focus and our moods and our feelings, that negative drift will be towards what's negative. It seems like what's negative, no matter how small it is, we will magnify it and give it our greatest attention. So do we have reason to doubt? There's probably reason to doubt, but I can assure you, you probably have more reasons to believe you can do it as opposed to having reasons to believe that you can't do it, right? And doubt is a form of belief, by the way. Again, we'll go into some of that in another episode. Doubt is not disbelief. Doubt is just believing you can't, as opposed to faith is believing you can. So you're exercising your belief system either way. It's just you're believing in your limitations and the impossibilities as opposed to believing in the possibilities and what can be consider your immeasurable, unlimited potential. All right? So when you think about this whole change thing, one perspective I think a lot of us may share is that change presents problems. This is a problem. Why? And is it a real problem? It doesn't matter if it's a real problem or not. If we think it's a problem, it's a problem. And whenever something shakes the sheets, in other words, it moves how we're all snuggled and we're cozy and we're curled up and we got the pillow fluff nice and everything, and we're just cozy in our life the way it is. When something comes and disturbs that, we can tend to look at that as a problem. Many of us don't default to, this is an opportunity, right? It's kind of like an earthquake, right? I think everybody's normal response is to grab something and hold on. It's a problem. And not too many people jump up and be like, wow, this is an opportunity, right? And I kind of get that, you know. However, when those kind of, figuratively speaking, earthquakes of changes come into our lives, we will tend to default that this is a problem, this is a problem. Well, here's the thing. Whether you look at it as a problem or not, one thing that we want to realize is that every day of our lives, it revolves around unsolved problems and then finding their resolutions. Here's the thing. If you have a job, you would not have a job if the employer did not have a problem that your job skills can come in and fill as a solution. See, you're already a problem solver. However, most of us operate from being problem magnifiers, right? We like to magnify the problem, no matter how small it is. We will magnify the problem. We will talk about the problem. We will talk about the problem. We'll talk about the problem. But just understand that you're already a problem solver, okay? If you have a job, you're solving somebody's problem. Now, that doesn't mean because you're solving somebody else's problem, you're not going to have any problems. Just understand that whatever it is you're looking to get to and whatever it is you're helping other people to get to, as far as a family unit, a church unit, governmental unit, business unit, however you're operating from a team perspective, understand, because this is important, the path of all progress in everything is paved by the brick and mortar of problems. I assure you that. No matter what path that you say, hey, it's not about tiptoeing through tulips and all this yellow brick road stuff, right? And if those are yellow bricks, those are yellow and bricks of problems. All right, that's just the path, man. That's just how it is. And only those that are willing to change and to adapt to those different problems and challenges are the ones that are going to be qualified to cash in and to acquire whatever it is they want. And cashing in doesn't necessarily always have to be about money. It can be cashing in on your ideal relationship, your ideal job, your ideal weight, right? Your ideal blood pressure or your ideal cholesterol level, your ideal waist size, your ideal home, whatever it is, however you measure it. I'm not here to tell you what to measure and how to measure it. What I'm saying is that whatever it is you're looking to get to, problems are open doors. They're not barriers. Solutions, and this is why we want to be solution seekers instead of problem magnifiers, is because solutions are bridges that give us passage through those problems. Without the solution, we never cross the problem. So remember, every problem, no matter how painful it may be in the moment, and I know sometimes our reaction is more emotional, so the problem gets magnified and we're not really thinking, and as I said in a previous episode, giving yourself that mental space to think so you can respond to the problem with a solution, as opposed to reacting emotionally and basically just throwing gas on the problem and making it a huge flame when it didn't really have to be that big. Right? It's like having a match. If you have a match and you throw some gas on it, what's going to happen? Yeah, you're probably going to have a bigger flame, right? So sometimes we take something, it can be, troublesome, but it doesn't have to become a personal crisis. So we don't need to respond to it like a personal crisis, and we certainly don't need to turn it into a personal crisis. So since problems are open doors and they're not barriers, all right, and the way to get to where it is we want to go is to have this solution-oriented focus, because that's the bridge that gives us passage through the problem to whatever the promised land is. We want to have a certain problem awareness, not an obsession. We're magnifying it. We want to have a certain level of awareness when it comes to those problems. So what do? Ask the right questions. For example, one of the most important questions you can ask yourself right now is, what is the single most important problem or challenge in your life right now that needs your immediate attention? The single one, not, oh my goodness, there's a dozen. It's like, oh, I have 11. I have a football team full of problems. if you had to put them into a hierarchy of impact or importance, what is the single most important problem that needs your attention, your immediate attention right now? All right. And also, we want to kind of scan the peripheral of our lives, or in sometimes the inner core of our lives, and we want to ask ourselves, what problems are we not acknowledging? What problems are we not acknowledging? For example, you may have a little pain in your side, or you may have a scar that shows up, or you may have something, and because we want to have the faith talk and we don't want to talk negative because, law of attraction this, law of attraction that, faith talk that, and all this other kind of stuff. Listen, and I believe I covered this in a previous episode. Do not sacrifice the truth for positives and negatives. Now, what do I mean by that? If acknowledging a pain is negative, forget the negative. If the pain is real, let's talk some truth. And if the pain requires you to go to the doctor, then go to the doctor. So that's what I mean by having some problems that you're not acknowledging. And sometimes we don't acknowledge them because we buy into a certain belief system that, don't speak death over yourself. People use biblical scriptures, life and death are in the power of the tongue. Listen, if you're saying, my side hurts, you're not going to kill over. It's like, he shouldn't have said that. He just had a heart attack. It's not going to happen like that. It's acknowledging what the truth is. What's the truth of the matter so you can address it? And it kind of goes back to that age-old saying, the truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. I don't see anywhere in the archives of history where the positives will set you free. No, the truth, right? The truth will set you free. And sometimes the truth can come in a negative form. So what are you not acknowledging? Okay, let's just acknowledge it. It's not about being positive or negative. It's about being truthful with ourselves and what's going on, because you'll never be able to solve a problem unless you're truthful that the problem even exists. Problem, challenge, however you want to label it, whatever's most comfortable for you, all right? Now, looking at your life, one of the things we want to be able to do is anticipate, all right? And a lot of us, we know from the patterns of habits and living our lives to the point that we've lived them, there are certain things we can anticipate. So let me ask you a question. What is likely to cause the next big breakout or crisis in your life? What's going to cause it? For example, do you have a project due that you're behind on, and if you don't deliver on that, all hell's going to break loose? Right? Or is there certain things that if you don't do them, there's going to be a breakout of a crisis. There's going to be some type of negative epidemic that hits your life. And it hits your life not because it had to, it hit your life as a result or an effect of you not taking care of something that should have been taken care of. So we want to be able to anticipate, if we don't do this or I don't do this, what is likely to happen as a result? In other words, by having this level of anticipation, we can prevent problems from happening. Listen, if you're studying for a test so you can graduate from college or high school or pass an exam to get a certain degree or whatever the case may be, you may understand that cramming is not going to serve you well. Which, statistically speaking, it really doesn't. Not that people haven't passed from cramming, but cramming is not necessarily the best thing to do to master a topic. But let's just say that cramming is just not going to serve you well, and you're more likely than not to pass if you cram. However, because you're constantly delaying and putting off the proper studying and not putting a certain pattern in place to study consistently to get the topic down to take the test, you're positioning yourself to cram. And as a result of that cram, all these other things are going to happen as a negative fallout. That's what I'm talking about, having this foresight to be able to understand what your actions or inactions right now can end up causing in your life. Another thing is what small problems or tiny little issues can grow and balloon into big problems. Small things that can just get out of control. For example, one of the things is not properly communicating with people on your job or people that you care about or people that you're working with. That could be a small problem, but let me tell you something, that can turn into a huge, huge issue. So scan your life and look at, okay, so what are some of the seeds here? Like the Bible says, a little leaveth the whole lump. A little fox has spoiled the vine. What are some of these little things here? Right? Like if you look at a door, those big old doors, depending on the door, it has 2 or 3 hinges, right? You take those 3 hinges off, that's going to be a problem opening the door. It's going to open. It's just not going to open the way you would like for it to open. And it's certainly not going to close the way you want it to close. But those 3 small things on the side of the door, disconnected, can cause a really big problem for the door, right? And if you're trying to keep things out, it can even be a bigger problem, right? So look at those things and just be honest and be like, okay, so you know what, this right here is not necessarily big, but if I don't take care of it, you know what, it can kind of get out of hand, right? And also looking at your life. What problems do you have in areas of your life? And again, we're addressing it as problems. I know some people like to have the positive talk. It's like, it's not problems, they're challenges. Well, whatever, okay? And they are what they are. They need to be addressed. Like I said, if you want to call them challenges, by all means, go ahead. If you want to call them problems, go ahead. You're not demonized for calling something a problem, all right? And you're not angelic because I don't call them problem, I call them challenges. Listen, let's just address them in the way so that we can get them taken care of. So in looking at this, what problems exist in areas of your life? Maybe it's work, maybe it's home, maybe it's school, maybe social interactions and activities, maybe your church, or interpersonal relationships in your household or amongst your friends and your peers. What kind of problems exist? But here's one of the things that's important. How is that problem or those group of problems infecting another area of your life? For example, if you have an argument in the morning with somebody you really care about and you really love, that can have a really negative and devastating impact on your work performance, which, by the way, not only does your work suffer, the company that you're working for suffers because they're depending on your performance. So there is this collateral damage that ultimately happens when one problem goes unresolved in one area. It's really hard to keep those things isolated. I know some people try to do that, but it's kind of hard to keep them isolated. You know, your emotional interactions with people, you know, I'm not saying that people can't compartmentalize and do that because you can. Athletes they excel at it. But there's some athletes that are just not that good at it, right? So you want to look at how's that impacting your life. And you start to look at the cause and effect tree. And it's like, well, listen, this negative experience or interaction, this problem that I'm having here in this relationship is infecting my work performance. Is now causing my performance at work to be dragged down, which is causing my company unit or my team or the business to be dragged down. So you start addressing the problem there. So that brings me to something that's really, really important. And this is a big question. Is the problem a symptom of a higher level problem? For example, a runny nose may be a problem, but it's really a symptom from like a cold or maybe an allergy, for an example. Now, is the runny nose a problem? Sure, but you don't want to treat the symptoms. Doesn't mean you want to ignore the symptoms. You want to acknowledge the symptoms. Well, what are the symptoms telling you? So if we don't start to take a bigger picture view of what we consider to be problems, we may not recognize that we're working on a symptom and not really getting to the heart of the problem. So for example, your work performance is going down. So you're talking about, I got to focus and you got to do all these different, you're trying to do all these things to pick up your performance at work, which is fine. You know, it's like taking care of something for your runny nose, sticking a wad of tissue in there to prevent it from running, whatever you do to take care of it. But does that mean that the core and the cause of that problem and of that symptom has been taken care of? No. So regardless if there's a real problem or symptom, the problem is likely to just continue going on and on and on if you let it linger because you're constantly dealing with the symptoms. In other words, what I'm saying is if you're experiencing what you consider to be a problem in your life, stop and think in terms of not just how do I eliminate this problem, but what caused it? In other words, we want to start to work our way backwards. Well, what caused it? What caused it? And that brings me to your change options. Remember early on in this episode, we talk about change your life, change your life. Well, let me tell you something. You have to take action to change your life. Isn't that true? Absolutely. But it's not just any action. You don't want to just take action to change your life. You want to take the right actions. And let me tell you something. Not all change requires the same kind of action. So what I want to do is give you 7 specific types of actions that you can handle different cause and effects changes. Okay. Now and I'm going to give you some examples in here of stuff that I have been guilty of for years. And some of it kind of lingers on even to this day. And I think we're all a work in progress. None of us have reached a point of perfection. Otherwise we will ascend to some higher level of being. And that's just not happening. We're all human, but being human is not an excuse. Okay. So I'm going to give you real stuff from my life, and it may kind of match some of the things that you may be experiencing, but I also want to give you a real selection of actions that you can take. So these are what I call your change it options. One of the first things is to fix it if corrective action is needed. In other words, if you're facing this change and something needs to be fixed, that requires corrective action. So what you want to do is you want to fix it. For example, if you have a crisis from lack of planning, then you want to fix that. If you're overreacting to certain things, you want to fix that. If you have a lack of priorities, you want to fix that. Those are things that you can fix. Okay? Those are things you can fix. See, for example, you don't want to eliminate priorities. So that's a different action you would take, but that action doesn't properly apply to that situation or change experience that it is you're having. So what I'm giving you here are specific actions that you can use in the change process instead of saying, go out there and take action and change your life. Change happens, and it happens deliberately when we take very specific, deliberate actions. So that's what it is I'm giving you. And you can just take the blueprint and use it however best serves you with what it is you're dealing with and where it is you want to get to. All right, so the first thing is you fix it if corrective action is needed. Improve it if boosting and modification action is needed. So not everything needs to be improved. So let's just say, administrative tasks, they're just kind of like weighing you down. Well, you know what? That may be something you want to improve. That's an improve it scenario. You have a whole bunch of junk mail and email, and you're just kind of like scattered when it comes down to all this junk mail that you're getting in there, and then all the email and the way you handle your email. Will improve it. Improve your process of filtering through junk mail and how you schedule going about getting your email handled. What about not delegating? It's like, you're just not delegating at all, or you're not delegating well. Well, guess what? Improve it. So when you're looking at what it is you're dealing with, ask yourself, is this something that requires a corrective action? If so, I need to fix it. Is this something that's requiring a boosting and a modification type of an action? If so, I'm going to improve it. So what you're having is an opportunity. So now what you're doing is you're building up your options in how to respond instead of just emotionally reacting. Remember in a previous episode, I said, stop, allow yourself that space so you can be more thoughtful, and then you can respond thoughtfully to what's going on as opposed to reacting emotionally. Well, these are some ways that when you have that space and you're thinking and you're being thoughtful, these are some things to think about in terms of what would be the ideal response based on what's going on. So again, if corrective action is needed, fix it. If boosting and modification action is needed, let's improve it. Now, if termination action is needed, then you eliminate it. So we're at fix it, improve it, eliminate it. Okay? And this is all leading to you changing it. All right? So hopefully this can help you. You know, it's always about it. Whatever it is, it's your it. But it's your it that you want to change it. If correction action is needed, fix it. If boosting or modification action is needed, improve it. If termination action is needed, eliminate it. For example, interruptions. We'll eliminate the interruptions. All right, let's just totally eliminate these interruptions. Attempting to do too much. So now your focus is diluted. Guess what we do? We eliminate certain things so we're no longer attempting to do too much. Mindless web surfing, which by the way, I've been guilty of them all. All right, so when I'm giving you these examples, these are examples that are basically taken from the history of my life. And I paid the price for them, and I'm still paying the price for some of these things even to this day. And I think we're forever on this battleground. So it's like whack-a-mole. You knock one thing down. Oh, here's another one. Oh, there's another one. So you're kind of like constantly in it. So I'm not throwing these out there like, oh, I've conquered them all. No, we kind of still deal with them. All right. So again, mindless web surfing. Well, eliminate it. All right. Now, if development action is needed, create it. So let's just say you don't have a schedule. You just go about your life just, bouncing off the walls. Well, let's create it. Let's create the schedule. Okay. That's going to bring some order out of chaos, right? What about no systems? So everything is just all over the place. It's haphazard, it's sporadic. It's just all over the place. So because there's no systems. Well, guess what? Let's create it. Let's create it. Let's create the system. Or what about the lack of structure? There's just like no structure or something. Well, a project plan. Let's create a project plan. That's going to bring some structure to what it is you're working on. All right. So you see what it is we're doing. So we're looking at everything, and we're not just giving some blanket response or taking just some general actions, because we just don't do that. It's football teams, they run plays. It's not let's run a play. No, it's going to be a passing play or it's going to be a running play. But then there's a certain kind of passing play and there's a certain kind of running play based on where they are in the field and all kinds of other things that contribute to the decision. And that's what it is you're doing. You're becoming more thoughtful, and you're deliberately allowing yourself to change to become what it is you want. So no matter how many different things tend to crumble around you, you're not going to let things go and change for the worse. You're going to look to proactively and deliberately, with your consent, change things for the better. So if development action is needed, create it. Now, if preparation action is needed, anticipate it. If preparation action is needed, anticipate it. In other words, if you can't stand criticism and you know you're going to get some criticism, anticipate it. So it's no longer taking you off guard. So you're no longer shocked by criticism. And granted, there's probably certain people that you know are going to criticize. It's almost like they're like wired genetically to just criticize, and complain. So you can anticipate that kind of stuff, right? So just anticipate it instead of allowing yourself to be shocked or taken off guard by it. All right, what about deadlines? What if you know you have a deadline that's coming up for a test or a project or a meeting or whatever? Listen, properly prepare for it, anticipate that deadline, and then make sure you we can go back one level higher and go back to creating the proper schedule, having the proper systems in place and the proper project plan to make sure we meet that deadline. Do you see what it is we're doing here? Also, what about snacking? It's like, well, this muffin top for the women and the love handles for the dudes, sometimes they're the result of snacking, and sometimes we snack. We can snack due to various reasons, but if you know that you tend to snack because of certain things, anticipate that and make sure that, one, you have healthier snacks around, or you do something to curb that appetite to want to snack. So you anticipate it. Instead of just saying, oh, I'm just a snacker. You weren't born and the doctor looked at you and said, oh, that's a snacker. No. Nobody comes out a snacker. Well, she's going to be one fine snacker when she grows up. That's not how it works. So stop labeling yourself. Do you snack? Sure. Are you a snacker? No way. Not even close. So if you know you snack and it's not really good for you from a health perspective, let's anticipate that and do something to make sure that we're not snacking in an unhealthy way. Okay. Now, if preventive action is needed, then it's pretty much straightforward. Prevent it. For example, arguments. Can arguments be prevented? I think a lot of them can, especially if you know that there's people that are just argumentative, and it's like if you're going to engage in a conversation with them, they're going to want to argue about something. So look at what you can do to prevent that argument. There's certain things you can say to people, which is quote unquote pushing their buttons that's going to tick them off, set them off, and then all of a sudden you're going to have this argument take place. Well, don't do it. Don't do it. There's nothing wrong with looking to avoid certain things. You're not a coward if you do that, because it's a waste of time and it's a waste of energy. It's better to avoid an argument that will waste your time, your focus, and your energy for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour, that after the argument, nothing is really resolved. It's better to avoid that argument and have the necessary engagement that may last 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then use that time that would have been spent unnecessarily and unproductively arguing in a more productive manner. So look at the types of things that can be argued. And if somebody wants to argue with you, don't let them push your buttons. Prevent it. Make sure you do the things to prevent getting into an argument. Because some people, and I think we all have them in our lives, they want to come and pick a fight with you. And and I'm not saying don't fight. I think there's some fights that are worth having. But you want to look, it's like, is this fight even, is this even worth having? If not, then don't even take the bait. All right. Also, doubt. If there's certain things that create doubt, and one of the things that can create doubt is lack of preparation. So if you know that if you're properly prepared, for example, during a presentation, a lot of people are doubtful of their presentation and speaking in public, not just because of the crowd, it's their material, knowing their stuff, and I don't want to forget anything. And they doubt that they're going to be able to deliver everything. Well, if that's the thing, then prevent that from happening by making sure that you're properly prepared. So you can prevent that. Certain frustrations. If certain things not in order or you're not able to find certain things, how many times have you bought something, you bought it, you downloaded it, and you frustrated yourself later on looking for it? Listen, I've been there. It's like, I know I bought it. I know I downloaded it. Now, where the heck is it? Right? Well, because of lack of structure on the computer, that can happen. So now all of a sudden you're spinning your wheels and you're frustrated trying to find stuff, which I think a lot of people, they spend their workday looking for stuff physically, looking for stuff digitally. Now, where did I put that? Where did I put that? And okay, so everybody becomes a sleuth. Let's find it. No. If you know that and now again, that's not the only thing that can create frustration. I'm sure there's other things, but if that creates frustration, then look at doing something that's going to prevent that. Okay. Now, if a comprehension action is needed, make sure you understand it. For example, certain terminology that may be new to you. Don't get frustrated. Understand the terminology, right? New software. Woo. Recently I've been doing the whole Mac thing, and it's like, wow, for a long time, I saw Mac, I would go back. I know people say when you go Mac, you don't go back. But when I saw a Mac, I would go back. I would step back. I'd be like, no way, baby, not for me. But I've crossed over, and I wasn't just learning Mac. I'm learning all types of software programs on the Mac. So it's new software. So my whole thing is I'm not going to sit there staring at the screen being frustrated. The software is not difficult, it's new. Have I ever used software before? Sure. Have you? Yeah. Have you ever used a computer? Sure. It's different. It's different, not difficult. It's just new. So if it's new software you haven't used before, don't throw up your hands talking about, hey, let's look at some tutorial videos, flip through the manual, get some instructions, let's understand it. All right. The same thing with technology, like new little gadgets and all kinds of other stuff. I mean, take it from kids. I mean, if you look at all these different console video games or all the different remotes that you can use on your PC, and you look at kids playing video games, I don't care how sophisticated the remote is, they dive in with a great deal of zeal and anticipation and master the 21 buttons. And then when you see them playing, it's like, how do they do that? Well, you know what? They took the time to understand it. So that's what we want to do. So the 7 specific actions, all right, and again, you can get these on the show notes at successsculptingshow.com. But if it requires corrective action, fix it. If it requires boosting and modification action, improve it. If it requires termination action, eliminate it. If it requires development action, then create it. If it requires preparation action, anticipate it. If it requires preventive action, prevent it. And if it requires comprehension action, understand it. Now, are those all the actions? No, but I think those actions pretty much cover, pretty much everything that, for the most part, that we will be dealing with on an ongoing change process. Okay. Now that we have that covered, we want to stack and layer on top of that what I call the 7 change transitions to making real change that matters. Okay, because it's one thing to, prevent something, anticipate something, create something, understand something, and fix something, and improve something, and we can eliminate stuff. We can do all of that. But the essence of who you are in terms of how you're responding to that, it's going to really dictate the actual texture of everything. Because correct me if I'm wrong, there is a tone in which you can do everything. There's a tone in which you can say something. You can improve something in a very irate and negative and bolsterous way, and you can do it in a very nice way. Now, I'm not talking about how you're treating other people, because I think that's going to be a byproduct of these change transitions. But the nature and the spirit in which you are doing these actions is important. So I want to give you some transitions, all right? And these are a lot of transitions that I've dealt with and I continue to keep and be mindful of. All right, so I'm just going to give these to you real quick. And again, you can get these on the show notes on successsculptingshow.com. All right, now the transitions are always going from to. And I want you to think in terms of the from and what is it costing you to remain there. And if you were to make the transition, or should I say, when you make the transition to I guess you could say the light side, the brighter side, what will be the payoff in doing that? For example, what does it cost you to be attached to something? And what would be the payoff if you become detached from it? See, if we're attached to a whole lot of things, especially things that are out of our control, that can cause a great deal of stress. And the unfortunate thing is that you're allowing something that you can't control to stress you out. You're attached to it. A lot of people, they want to go start a business or they want to place a trade. They're so attached to it, they end up trading or running a business scared. What they call trading with scared money. So they pull out of a trade too soon in the marketplace. Or they bail out of an opportunity too soon because this has got to work, this has got to work, this has got to work. No, it doesn't. What if your perspective went from being attached? I'm not saying not caring. There's a big difference between not caring. I'm talking about not being attached to the outcomes where it stresses you out, but what you are is you're detached from it. Think about what does it cost you to be attached to certain things. For example, a woman that's unfortunately attached to an abuser, or a man that is unfortunately attached to an abuser. What is that costing? We know in the archives of history, you don't have to look too far to see the many women where it cost them their lives, right? What does it cost you when a person is addicted to certain things? What does it cost? That's being attached. Addiction is just like a higher level of attachment. What does it cost them? It's cost people their relationships. It's cost people their jobs. It's cost people a lot. So what's the payoff of becoming detached? Now, remember, being detached is not about, I don't care. That's not what we're talking about, okay? So it's not talking about, in other words, not being attached is not, I can care less. No, we care, but we're not going to care to the point that we're so attached that it weighs, the performance of what happened weighs us down, and it's able to then control our life experience. We don't want to do that because now we're not under control. Another one is going from reacting to certain things to watching, to just watching it happen. Let me give you an example. Let's just say somebody is yelling at you, they're fussing at you, they're cussing at you, they're pointing at you. Now, you know that there's a whole side of you that it's getting stirred up. What has it cost you to react as opposed to just watching the person, watching what's happening? Where now all of a sudden you're being watchful and you're not reacting. You're just watching. You're not reacting. I want you to think about that. What would be the payoff of just watching as opposed to what it ultimately costs you to react and basically engage in their verbal combat or whatever kind of combat it is that they want to engage you in, or whatever it may be. Something's happening. Instead of reacting to it, you're watching. All right. Or when these certain things come into your life, going from resisting it to flowing with it. Because here's the thing, you're not able to control it anyway. So instead of trying to resist it, it shouldn't be this way. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it shouldn't be this way. It's like, well, it is. So instead of creating this manufactured friction to what has just entered into your life, and you're starting to resisting, like, I can't believe this shouldn't be happening, which by the way, that right there is a key phrase that lets you know you're resisting. This shouldn't be happening. It is happening. And you're now starting to resist it happening. That's going to create friction emotionally and otherwise. And then all of a sudden it just starts to stir up a whole bunch of other problems. So instead of resisting it, we flow with it. Now, flowing with it does not mean we like it. It means we love it. It's like, oh my gosh, welcome. No. It's just that we're not going to waste our energy and our efforts and our goodwill in resisting something that's just going to come in anyway. In which, by the way, think about this. The more you resist it, the longer you allow it to stay. When all these different things, they're passing through our lives. They're like storms, they pass through. No storm is permanent. But if you're sitting there arguing with the storm, resisting the storm, you just allow the storm to overstay its passage. So just don't resist it, just flow with it. All right, what about moving from judging to accepting? And this is a big one for you, because many times people judge elements of themselves instead of accepting it. They judge their looks, they judge their environment, they judge their lifestyle, they judge their education, they judge all these different things as opposed to accepting it. And here's the thing, judging it doesn't change it. Judging your past doesn't change your past. It certainly doesn't serve you. So wouldn't it be better to go down the path of just accepting it? Because arguing with it and judging your past will never change it. Right? And guess what? Judging other people is not necessarily going to change them. Sometimes it's just about acceptance. Now, acceptance is not approval. Okay? That's not what we're saying. A person can do something, or something could have happened, or there can be something that's in your life. There may be something in your life that you absolutely don't like your weight. Well, you can beat the crap out of yourself and judge yourself. Now, how do you think that's going to make you feel, and what do you think you're going to ultimately do? And that's probably not going to turn out too good, right? So we accept it. That doesn't mean we approve the obesity and being overweight or whatever the issue may be, but accepting it allows us to more easily correct it. It allows us to, because we're not fighting it. It's like, hey, now we can more clearly see what's the solution instead of sitting here fighting it and judging it, which takes us to the next one, fighting it versus surrendering to it. Fighting it is as opposed to surrendering. It's like the economy. Oh my gosh. Listen, I don't care how big and bad and bold you may be. You can't fight the economy because it's a beast and monster of its own. Now, surrendering to it does not mean that you cave in. You let the economy get the best of you. What surrendering to it means you're basically acknowledging the present state of where it is. It removes the complaints because that's not going to help you. It removes all the judging. That's not going to help you because that fighting wraps up a whole lot of the different things to it. We were attached to how it was. Remember the good old days. Well, who says they're over? You're talking like they're not going to, that there's no more good old days, which, by the way, any day can be a good day. It's all about what you deposit into it. I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect day, but just because it's not necessarily perfect doesn't mean it has to automatically equal a bad day. All right. And then two more real quick in our transitions: criticizing to recognizing, going from criticizing to recognizing, right? You don't have to criticize certain things. Listen, people love to be critics. Some people get off on being critics. So what? Let them do it. Let them do it. So be it about yourself or about somebody else, about your performance or somebody else's performance. Instead of criticizing, you can recognize it. You can recognize the good parts of the performance and you can recognize the bad parts of the performance. But there really is not going to serve you well if you just beat the crap out of yourself or somebody else with criticism and criticism and criticism, right? Now, I know you'll be like, oh, well, what about constructive criticism? Well, listen, most of the time when people are criticizing, it's not really about constructive criticism as much as it is about destructive criticism. So I think you understand what it is I mean about moving from criticizing to recognizing, all right? And another way to look at that transition is instead of criticizing the worst parts of your day, the worst parts of your performance or somebody else, recognize the good stuff. We're not playing make-believe like the bad stuff didn't happen. But what we're doing is we are recognizing the good. We're getting a habit. We're developing a habit of encouraging ourselves instead of waiting for somebody else to pass us a drink of encouragement. In other words, hey, I can encourage myself. I can recognize the good that's in me. And it's not about being gaudy. It's not about ego tripping, if you will. It's about knowing that there's good things in you and you don't want to wait for a committee to come by and start to point those things out for you. You can do that for yourself. It's a healthy thing to do. Right? And what about closing down, moving from closing down to opening up? What does that mean? When something hits, many people have a tendency to clam up. Going back to the story of the carrots and the eggs and the coffee, I guess we could say that the eggs closed up because it was soft and then it got hard. So think about that as being like, just like stiff and immobilized. So instead of closing down when something hits you, how about opening up? Right? Or instead of closing down when somebody wants to have a conversation with you, how about opening up? Right? So at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to do change and not be done by change. You want to do change because if you're not going to do change, change is going to do you. Let me say that again. If you don't do change, change is going to do you. And I'm going to tell you the change is going to do you in. Change is not going to do you a good one. And it's not that it's biased. It just is that way for some reason. It just is. It's for example, if you were outside and a hurricane was coming by, do you think the hurricane cares? It's going to blow you, the trees, the trucks, the cars, the houses. It doesn't care. It's just a hurricane that's coming. That's it. Here it comes. So you decide, hold on, or duck, or dig a hole, or hey, get out of town the moment they start to give the warnings or something. You have an opportunity to respond and anticipate. Remember, hey, if preparation action is needed, we anticipate it. What we do? Get out of Dodge. Get out of Dodge. So understand that there's certain things that are just going to happen in life, and change is one of them. So we want to be the initiators. We want to do change. And when certain things are just like thrown upon us, instead of reacting to them, we want to respond in a very healthy way. We want to do it with confidence. We want to do it with conviction. We want to do it consistently. And I think more importantly, we want to do it for a greater cause. In other words, find a reason to do this that goes beyond you personally and your own pocketbook, if this is all about money for you, for that greater cause, for something that's bigger than you, something that's bigger than your life, living for something that goes beyond you and everything about you, your image, your name, your business, your bank account, your materialism, and all this other kind of stuff, your ego, your spirit, making a contribution to something that is so big, it really just dwarfs you, if I can use that phrase. right? It's that massive. You're living for something that is bigger than this moment, something that's bigger than the challenge. And let me tell you something, that one thing alone, doing it for a greater cause, will help you to make it through so much more. Because if you think it's just all about you, many people think so little of themselves, unfortunately, they will result to suicide because they didn't think about a greater cause. They didn't think about anything beyond their world. In other words, they lived life through this myopic lens of themselves and in this moment. And that's it. They didn't think about the greater things that can happen in the future. They didn't think about the greater things that they could contribute to or that they were contributing to. So what was there else to live for? What was there to live for? There was no hope. There was no faith. There was no vision. There was no inspiration. So the only motivation that can be found was the motivation to kill themselves. Listen, I've been on that brink before. I know many years ago, I was at that suicidal point, big time. When you feel as if you're stripped of everything, and you don't just feel like you're stripped of everything, you are stripped of everything. You feel as if you have been gutted out from the inside and you're left alone. Yeah, that can drive a person. And listen, it is our own personal responsibility to fight those demons when they show up. When those dark forces start to show up and they try to drag you into this dark place to get you to believe a lie, that just because man has forsaken you and has left you, that you have been left behind by God, and that's not true. So we want to always look at in those moments for that greater cause. This is not about me. Me even doing the Success Sculpting Show, trust me, it's not about me. If I want to have these conversations with myself, I can have these conversations with myself. This is about a greater cause. This is about something that goes beyond me, my name, my brand. This is about leaving a legacy of impact that ripples for as long as time continues to prevail in a positive way. That greater cause that makes me want to just sit here and get everything together and do everything and put everything together and sit here at the microphone and have fun with you and talk with you and put all this together. And I can't wait for the next episode. And then I get the voicemail messages and I get the emails, the private ones are like, hey, don't share this with anybody. I'm like, I'm not going to share it with anybody. And all the information that people give me that let me know how this show has impacted them. What is your greater cause? To even want to change your life. What is the greater cause? Connect with that greater cause. Because no matter what it is you're going for, there's bumps, there's bruises. You'll be battered, beat down, beat up, and just all kinds of stuff that happens. And as we wrap up this episode, let me tell you something. And I want you to remember this. Success is about both scars and stars. And I can assure you, I absolutely assure you, wherever you see stars of achievement, they are covering the scars of achieving it. I'll see you in episode 7 of the Success Sculpting Show.
Thanks for listening to the Success Sculpting Show with Stephen Pierce.
If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address.
SuccessSculptingShow.com to your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archives of previous podcasts and check the schedule to join us for our next live streaming Success Sculpting Show webcast. This has been a Success Sculpting Incorporated production. Join us next time for another edition of the Success Sculpting Show with Stephen Pierce, and tell your friends.